Good afternoon, and thank you, Sonia, for that wonderful introduction. And let me start by thanking the Netherlands Palestine Committee for inviting me back to the Netherlands. I was here 2 years ago and have very fond memories of that visit when I learned a lot about the Netherlands, and I feel that since that visit, my knowledge of the work that people are doing in the Netherlands in solidarity with Palestine has become so much deeper, and I think it helped to build our connections over time, and I hope very much the same from this visit. It's also a great pleasure to share the podium later on with David and Anya, whose work is very well known. I'm very happy to see many friends in this room that I met during my previous visit and subsequently, and especially to see Hayo Maya with us, who is someone whose work and words I greatly admire and appreciate. I also saw a copy of the email which was circulated to all the members of the Dutch Parliament, warning that the terrorist Mohammedans from the PLO and Fatah and Hamas were meeting today in order to plan the genocide of the Jews. And this is a serious threat, and I would have expected that, given the gravity of the threat, we would have seen some effort to at least warn the public, but perhaps the absence of such an effort indicates that maybe the threat is a non-existent one. And of course, this brings me to the first thing that I want to talk about today, which is to address the fact that this is the first time since the controversy that arose last November over the funding of the electronic intifada, that I have a chance, or that I have a chance to address this issue directly in the Netherlands, because one of the most striking features of the whole controversy over ECO and the electronic intifada, started by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, was the total absence of our voices from the controversy. And so it's important to have an opportunity to redress that. And I want to mention that yesterday I gave an interview with the VPRO television program Tegenlicht, which I believe is going to be broadcast on October 10th, which will talk more about this, and I think it's important that our voices are heard in the Netherlands. But I just want to make a few comments about that. As you know, last November, an extreme right-wing Israeli organization called NGO Monitor, with very close ties to the Israeli government and military, with settlers in the West Bank and with Islamophobic groups and figures in the United States, began a public campaign against the electronic intifada, the publication which I co-edit with several other distinguished colleagues, really professional and profoundly dedicated colleagues that I'm really proud to work with. The campaign was amplified by the Israeli newspaper, the Jerusalem Post, by a particularly scurrilous and poorly researched article which never sought any input or response from us, and it focused on a grant that the electronic intifada has received over several years, starting in about 2005, from the Dutch organization ECO, the non-governmental development and human rights agency connected with the Protestant Church in the Netherlands. That grant has been important to us in allowing us to develop the Electronic Intifada as a global, a publication with global reach. Although we have never been dependent on funding from ECO, it was nevertheless an important support for us and for our mission of reporting on human rights in Palestine. Nevertheless, the smear campaign by NGO Monitor and the Jerusalem Post claimed that ECO, and because ECO is subsidized by the Dutch government, therefore the Dutch taxpayers were subsidizing what they called an anti-Semitic publication. They made some quite scurrilous charges that, every day we were comparing Israel to Nazi Germany, that we were publishing anti-Semitic material, that we were misusing funds, all sorts of claims that were totally without any basis in fact. And the goals of the attack, I think, were clear: to use political pressure to prevent ECO, number one, from carrying out its Middle East program, and to damage the Electronic Intifada as a publication and put it on the defensive. And I think there are other goals I'll say something about in a minute. We, of course, responded very publicly and vigorously to these attacks, refuting the false allegations both on our website and through other media. Now, of course, the attack on us was perhaps not very surprising, given that earlier in 2010, the Reut Institute, a very well-connected Israeli think tank with close ties to the Israeli government, had called publicly for a campaign of sabotage and attack targeting the Palestinian human rights and solidarity movement. And the words sabotage and attack are their words. And they even suggested, and of course we reported on this at the time on the Electronic Intifada, they even suggested that Israel's intelligence agencies should be deployed around the world to disrupt, sabotage, and attack the Palestinian solidarity movement. And that's a grave threat, given that the Israeli secret services, such as the Mossad, are known for forging passports of various European countries and even using them to commit murder. So if they do not shy away from murder overseas on the soil of friendly countries, then there really is very little that we can't expect them to do. One, of course, surprising element was that the Dutch government, in the form of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Uri Rosenthal, immediately appeared to lend a credence to these attacks on the Electronic Intifada and on ECO through numerous public comments. At no point did Mr. Rosenthal or the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands contact the Electronic Intifada or seek a response to the allegations that were made in public, nor attempt to engage us in any kind of dialogue. And I think that's important because historically the voices of Palestinians and groups committed to the rights of Palestinians have been excluded, and Palestinians have been talked about as absent parties. And that was very much the approach that Minister Rosenthal took towards us. It didn't matter what we thought, it didn't matter what we said, it didn't matter what the reality of the situation was. The only thing that mattered was what the very extreme right Israeli group was saying about us, and that that was enough for the minister to attack us in public. A specific point of contention was Mr. Rosenthal's claim that the Electronic Intifada supports the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more later on. Of course, BDS is widely viewed as a legitimate tactic that helped end apartheid in South Africa and is endorsed across Palestinian civil society and by a growing number of civil society organizations around the world, including, of course, within the Netherlands. Now, just to clear this up, although I support BDS, and I don't want to speak for others, I'm fairly sure other people involved in the Electronic Intifada do as well. As a publication, the Electronic Intifada doesn't endorse individual campaigns. And that's for the very simple practical reason that if we endorse one campaign, we would have to endorse others, and then if we don't endorse one, people would wonder why and wonder what's behind it. So we take a very simple position that as a publication, we don't endorse campaigns, but everyone who writes on the Electronic Intifada is free, as in any free media, to put forward the position that they espouse. And there's nothing in our principles that would prevent us from publishing a well-reasoned argument against BDS, because we are committed to providing a free forum. However, I'm very clear that I support it. But it's undeniable that BDS is now a major part of the discourse about Palestine and the efforts to change the situation from the current situation of rigid and solidifying apartheid towards something more just. And therefore, as a publication, we're committed to reporting on BDS, providing analysis and opinion about it as well. Of course, if the Dutch government had contacted us before the minister made his public comments, we would have refuted the false factual allegations and had the opportunity to do that very quickly. But rather than engage with us in any way, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs communicated its message through the media. And I believe, I'm almost certain of this, although I don't want to speak for ECO, that ECO learned about this issue through the media, that the ministry did not even contact ECO with its concerns. My view is that this was more than just about the Electronic Intifada and even ECO. That it became clear to me that the government of the Netherlands, the current government, views direct or indirect funding of NGOs as a means to limit freedom of conscience, to silence criticism about urgent human rights situations, and by implication, to impose Dutch government policy globally. This was an understanding that was shared by many in Dutch civil society who reacted vigorously to the attempt to tie funding to towing a particular political line. Remember that the minister had said, well, they support BDS and this is against Dutch government policy. Well, we were never told that our job was to faithfully write articles supporting Dutch government policy. That was never in our contract with ECO. I think that this is the most high-level effort by any government that